Hello, art historians. Welcome back. I'd like to provide you with a weekly summary video of week 3. So we are all done wrapping up week 3 and now moving on to week 4, which at the end of this week will be the halfway point of our class. I don't understand how that happened. I mean, we went from January being so slow to suddenly we're halfway through our course together. That's pretty crazy. So weekly summary for week 3. Let's talk about our 2 quizzes, our discussion, and then I just have some reminders for you all. So we are looking at quiz 4, Egypt number 2 and 3. And for this quiz, there was a question in regards to the theme of an artwork that I want to talk about. So we had a question asking about Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and 3 daughters, and understanding what the primary theme would be in this family scene. So, of course, when we look at an image like this, it is incredibly unique to Egyptian art stylistic history. This is marking a point in time when things were changing. And there are a lot of kind of guessing done as to why the change. Is it kind of creating a name for oneself as a pharaoh? Is it cementing kind of like your moment in history? Was there reasoning beyond that we're not sure of? But regardless, Akhenaten was one of the first pharaohs in Egyptian history to adjust a lot of things. He changed the religion. He changed the location of the capital, and he also changed the art style. We see a lot of more stylistic and frontal views of folks in Egyptian carvings and paintings and representations, and now we have a little bit more of an androgynous curvature to our figures that is very unusual. Mostly unusual also because before Akhenaten's time in rule, things were not this way, and afterwards, they were put back. So clearly it's this little blip, but an important moment that really reveals a lot to us about the succession of different rulers and kind of how these Egyptian excuse me, so sorry, how these Egyptian pharaohs were really trying to make sure that their memory stayed in the minds of their subjects and of the people of Egypt. So, for this situation, although the sun disk god Aten is absolutely represented in this scene, featured prominently even, top, middle, rays coming down, little hands with the ankhs at the ends, so cute. Love that. There is no obvious indication that this narrative is including some sort of, ritual sacrifice. The theme depicted here, domestic harmony and familial love, is incredibly unique, and truthfully, it's one of the aspects of this work that's most notable. Previously, we don't see a pharaoh and his, children, his wife, first, second, whatever wife it may be. We don't see a casual scene like this. Everything before now is very formalized. It gives that kind of air of untouchableness, but this is something that people can relate a little bit more to. So it is kind of interesting to think about. I also think about this quite extensively myself. I just finished a book by Michelle Moran called Nefertiti. I'm reading Cleopatra's Daughter right now by her. She's such an excellent author, so I highly recommend you check it out, especially if you really enjoyed this era of art history. Nefertiti gave me personally such a great insight into this era and all of like the different politics and things that were going on. And so one thing that we note is that, this development in art is vastly different from what came before, and you have to think about why. So prior to this moment, Egyptian royal representations were formalized, and they never showed casual scenes with a family in a relaxed, chill state. I mean, imagine if you were like the king or queen or ruler over something, and instead of showing you on your throne, it was you chilling on a Saturday afternoon watching, Housewives on TV. You don't see that kind of stuff, and that's kind of what the equivalent to this is. We don't see any fighting. We don't see any clear indication this piece is demonstrating economic prosperity, and so that's why that answer would have been correct. Next, we have quiz number 5, which is all about the Indus Valley and the Aegean. And so we had a seal with a seated figure, trying to understand what purpose it might have served in Mohenjo-Daro culture. Now, of course, it's not a cooking utensil. I guess you could make cool designs with it, but it's more decoration than even cooking. Though these things were small and could be misconstrued as forms of currency, they were not. And yes, I would say this is could be considered a decorative object, but the more important purpose would be to mark ownership or authority. So this type of seal was extremely important for marking possession, and especially on objects that could retain an imprint. And so while it does indicate ownership, it doesn't necessarily indicate that the seal itself served as a currency exchangeable item. These seals were decorative in a sense, but their function in society centered more about possession. And so that's why that answer would have been correct. Now let's talk about our discussion before I get to my reminders. First, I want to comment all about Nefertiti. Oh, I can't help it. I know I'm focusing on her a lot with this video, but she's just so cool, and I loved the responses to our discussion that some of you had here. Gabby had mentioned that the bust was made to show Nefertiti as this perfect queen. We can imagine it being displayed, and how powerful and beautiful she looks, and Gabby, you absolutely are correct. This work has been, the lore behind it is that it was actually found partially constructed in the workshop of an artist, not finished. That's why she's got a blank eye. And, the formal characteristics of her portrait bust convey such this deep sense of beauty and power. This image of her is often compared metaphorically to a very heavy flower bud on a very slender stalk. Gosh, I am just the biggest Nefertiti fan, I'm not going to lie. Equally as such for Hatshepsut, but Nefertiti more so recently. So I love that we're talking about her. Tammy, you also noticed that the skin texture and smoothness of this portrait bust was just something that came to you, and when you spent a little bit more time looking at it, Nefertiti was so beautiful. I mean, can you imagine being the artist and assigned to create her likeness? It's so much pressure, but it's really awesome that you're able to see all these little features. And last but not least, let's talk a little bit about some of you who mentioned the Last Judgment of Hunnefer from the Book of the Dead. And Genevieve, you noticed that the heart being weighed against the feather being a very interesting concept, knowing that we have this horrible crocodile god who's actually half, 1/3 croc, 1/3 hippo, 1/3 lion. It's a very simple but also complex scene. I agree with you in telling the full story. I love this narrative. It reminds me of a comic book where we see characters represented multiple times, but with the function of demonstrating the passage of time. It's within the story itself. I love Amit and Mott. I think this is so interesting. The series on, I think it would be Disney Plus, Moon Knight, actually shows you this process. We do have Taweret, the hippo goddess, present. I believe it was her name. But regardless, they do talk through this Amit Mott situation, and so you can kind of get a sense for those sort of rituals in the ancient Egyptian culture, but in a modern TV show. So if you're interested, I highly recommend. I love it. It is such an interesting concept, and getting to see this process by which the Egyptians believed their souls journey to the afterlife is so especially important, especially when we consider this monstrously gigantic pyramid that they created for their final resting place and palaces for the next world. So seeing that kind of come together is super cool. And Jaden, you also mentioned that Hunnefer is interesting because we see him multiple times, and you notice that after spending a little bit more time looking at the scene, you notice that Hunnefer was actually leaning forward, almost in excited anticipation. He made it through this first journey of the heart weighing, and it's really stressful, I can imagine. It's such a small detail, and even after teaching this work of art for 10 years myself, I never actually really noticed that little small element. I love that. These are the small details that you should be noticing. So great job here. Now, last but not least, let's talk reminders. We are in week 4. This is a week that has a little bit more work than usual, simply because we do have a writing assignment and you do have your exam. So keep this in mind. I would really recommend getting an early start on this for this week, just so you don't fall behind. Looking ahead as well, week 7 is including the formal writing assignment. This is also open already. There is a module at the top of the modules tab in Canvas, and I want to make sure we are all aware this requires an in-person visit to a museum. I've been saying this for now a couple weeks, so there are no exceptions, folks. It needs to be in person. Doesn't have to be SLAM, but you need to go see artwork. This is an essential assignment for this course, and you cannot pass it. without doing it. So definitely don't let that slip your mind. And last but not least, week 8 is including a writing assignment that actually asks you to pull information from each unit within each module. I had mentioned this, I guess not last week, but the week before. And if you intend on submitting that assignment, it is open already. I recommend that you start now, so that way in week 8, you're not trying to gather everything together and getting a little stressed out. This is not what the point of the class is supposed to be. It's supposed to be enjoyable. So if time management can be helped to kind of emphasize that, I'm all here for it. So I think that is about it for week 3, folks. Excellent work. I appreciate all of your submissions, following templates, really doing a great job. And I hope you have a great halfway point week. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm always here. Bye, everyone.